நீங்க metal scrap sales or purchases பண்றீங்க அப்படின்னா do not miss to watch this video till the end. ஏன்னா TDS, reverse charge and registration requirements நிறைய முக்கியமான changes metal scrap industryல புதுசா இந்த 54th GST Council recommendation மூலமா 3 notifications issue பண்ணிருக்காங்க. Welcome to GST with Saradha in shorts. Firstly, what is metal? It includes all HSN headings starting from 72 to 81, which includes iron and steel, copper, nickel, aluminum, lead, zinc, etc. So இந்த மாதிரியான எல்லா metal scrapsலயுமே இருக்கக்கூடிய purchases or sales நீங்க பண்றீங்க அப்படினா இந்த வீடியோ கம்ப்ளீட்டா உங்களுக்கு ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கும். Now let us understand the compliances at a macro level. Suppose if the supplier as well as the recipient both are not required to be registered under GST அப்படினா then this particular transaction is completely outside GST. That is in the metal scrap supply la tax liability is not payable forward charge or reverse charge. The second scenario, if the supplier is registered then the supplier should only pay the tax liability under forward charge mechanism at the rate of 18% and it doesn't matter whether the recipient is registered or not registered. But suppose இதே scenarioல அந்த recipient is also registered அப்படினா then the recipient has the additional tax compliances of doing the TDS at the rate of 2% on this transaction. The third scenario, if the supplier is not required to be registered at all அப்படினா in which case if the recipient is required to be registered அப்படினா then this registered recipient should pay the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism at the rate of 18%. So hope this makes it clear. Now let's get into the detailing. We will classify it as to RCM related compliances, TDS related compliances and for the supplier side compliances.
சபா இப்பவே கண்ண கட்டதே.
Central tax rate notification 6/2024 மூலமா புதுசா இந்த reverse charge tax liability has been introduced on this goods, that is the metal scrap sales. So as per this, அந்த metal scrap purchase பண்ணக்கூடிய registered dealer should pay the tax liability under reverse charge at the rate of 18% if the supplier is not a registered person. So இதுல முக்கியமா நோட் பண்ண வேண்டிய விஷயங்கள் ரெண்டு. Number 1, இந்த மாதிரி reverse charge scenarioல recipient should raise a self invoice, but the self invoice should be raised within 30 days from the date of purchase of the scrap metal, which is a very recent change in the GST law. And the next thing is this metal scrap purchase is also eligible for input tax credit subject to other checks as per section 16 and section 17 because it is in the course of furtherance of business. The second thing is TDS. TDS in GST law was introduced only for government agencies and public sector units. இதுல புதுசா இப்ப இந்த metal scrap has also been introduced, which means அந்த metal scrap purchase பண்ணக்கூடிய அந்த recipient should be complying with this TDS provisions. Now what is this contract value? Contract value அப்படின்றது ஒரு invoice-கான particular value மட்டும் இல்ல, ஒரு year-கான cumulative value-வா நீங்க செக் பண்ணணும். If the contract value exceeds 2.5 lakhs, then the TDS provisions under section 51 will be applicable. So which means every single invoice-ல இருக்கக்கூடிய அந்த supply value-ல without including the GST amount, அந்த supply value-ல மட்டும் 2% GST has to be deducted. So it is 2% in the case of IGST and 1% CGST and 1% SGST in the case of intrastate transactions. So here, how do you compute? Let's say for example, if the total contract value for a year is 5 lakhs, so which means it has exceeded 2.5 lakhs. So for one particular invoice, let's say if it is 1 lakh அப்படினா அதுல GST will be charged by the supplier under forward charge mechanism at 18%. So the total invoice value including GST comes to 1,18,000. So இதுல the recipient should be deducting the tax of 2%, which means 2,000, which is 2% on the 1 lakh rupees. So in the 2,000 rupees should be deducted and that has to be separately paid to the government as a TDS. Now remember, this is only GST TDS and I am not discussing about income tax TDS. So now coming back, if in the 1,18,000 la 2,000 government ku remit பண்ணிட்டு remaining 1,16,000 will be remitted to the supplier of the metal scrap. Now what is important here in terms of the compliance அப்படினு சொல்லி பாத்தீங்கன்னா, most important, this recipient, registered recipient of metal scrap should now get a new registration under GST for TDS compliance. This cannot happen through your regular GST registration. So there is a separate registration which is available as a tax deductor. அந்த particular registration எடுத்து அதுல தான் இந்த TDS has to be done and for which GSTR 7 has to be filed on a monthly basis within 10th of the subsequent month. So this is an additional compliance burden for a registered person who is purchasing metal scrap from another registered supplier. Now this TDS on metal scrap is newly inserted through notification 25/2024 central tax. Both RCM and TDS compliances are with effect from 10th October 2024. இதுல முக்கியமான விஷயம் என்னன்னா, there cannot be a scenario where both RCM and TDS are applicable. It is either RCM or TDS, which means if the supplier is unregistered, then the recipient has to pay the tax under reverse charge mechanism. If the supplier is registered, then the recipient should only pay the tax deduction. Now third part, let's understand the compliances from the perspective of the supplier. So supplier sideல நீங்க பாத்தீங்க அப்படின்னா அவங்க முக்கியமான ஒரு விஷயம் அந்த recipient sideல ஒரு tax deduction பண்ணி அதை remit பண்ணுவாங்கன்னு சொல்லிருந்தோம் இல்லையா, அந்த tax deduction-அ supplierக்கு e-cash ledgerல claim பண்றதுக்கான ஒரு facility இருக்கு. So which means the supplier should claim that cash in their cash ledger and then they can either utilize it for the purpose of offsetting against their tax liability or they can claim it as a refund separately. Now what is most important from the supplier perspective அப்படின்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா, பொதுவா GST லால ஒரு பர்టిక్యులர் சப்ளையருக்கு இருக்கக்கூடிய எல்லா டிரான்சாக்ஷனுமே the entire supplyயுமே it is only covered under reverse charge mechanism அப்படினா then the person is completely exempted from taking a GST registration. But இதுக்கு ஒரு எக்ஸெப்ஷனா இந்த metal scrap dealer கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்க. Which means what? ஒரு metal scrap dealer do not have this kind of registration benefit. He has to compulsorily take the tax registration if his threshold of turnover exceeds 40 lakhs or 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, however be it, depending upon goods and services or goods or services and the state from which he is operating. So ரெண்டு முக்கியமான compliance requirement from the supplier perspective. One is he has to take the registration if the aggregate turnover threshold exceeds, and the second one, if he is registered, he can also claim the TDS credit and he can use it in the e-cash ledger.
அந்த பக்கம் பாதாள கிணறு முடியல.
So on a conclusion note, all these changes are with effect from 10th October 2024. அதனால immediate-ஆ உங்களோட transactions எல்லாமே relating to metal scrap purchases or sales ரெண்டுத்துல எது இருந்தாலுமே சரி careful-ஆ compliances-அ verify பண்ணுங்க. And most importantly, if you are a registered purchaser who is purchasing metal scrap from a registered supplier அப்படின்னா immediately apply for a TDS registration, because without that registration, which will obviously take some time for you to get approved, without that registration you cannot do the TDS related compliances. So in the October month udiya compliances, when you are doing it in the month of November, carefully check all these in your metal scrap related transactions. Hope you find this video useful. தொடர்ந்து பேசுவோம் GST with Saradha.